Hey, so tonight, we're going to talk about what dating was like in the Victorian era. And trust me, if you think dating today is complicated with all the apps and confusing messages, just wait. You're about to hear about the confusing system of rule books, chaperones, and social customs that controlled every single thing a man and woman did together in the 1850s. We're talking about a time when there were rules for even making eye contact, when a man lifting his hat was like sending a text message, and when getting a gift from the wrong person could destroy your reputation for good message. And if you're enjoying these stories, I'd be really grateful for a like or a subscribe. I'm super curious where you're all listening from, so please leave a comment with your location and what time it is there. It always amazes me how people from all over the world are falling asleep to this. All right, find a cozy spot. Take a nice, slow breath, and just let your body sink into whatever you're lying on. We are going back to 1855 London, and trust me, you're going to be very thankful for your mattress by the time we finish. The Victorians had a phrase, making love, but it didn't mean what you think it means. Back then, making love was about courtship, the proper way of winning someone's heart. And if you wanted to get through the Victorian dating world, you had to know the rules. So, congratulations. You've just woken up in May of 1855, right in the middle of London. But this isn't the London you know. This is Queen Victoria's London, where the air in the morning is thick with coal smoke, like a fog, where you can hear the sound of horse hooves hitting the cobblestone streets outside your window. And the smell, oh, the smell is something totally different. Your nose wrinkles without you even meaning to, as you pull the heavy wool blankets up to your chin. The good news is you're 22 years old and from a good middle-class family. Your father owns a small but successful shop that sells sewing supplies, which means you have enough money for nice clothes and food, but not enough to do nothing all day. The bad news is you're a woman in 1855, which means your whole future depends on one thing: finding a good husband. And the rules for doing that are as complicated as trying to waltz while juggling teacups. You stretch your legs under the rough cotton sheets, feeling the heavy quilt pressing down on your chest. There's no central heating in this house. It won't be invented for many years. So every morning starts with a deep chill that comes through the stone walls. Your housemaid has already been awake since 5 a.m., lighting the coal fires downstairs. And you can hear her heavy steps on the wooden stairs as she brings the coal bucket up to start the fire in your bedroom. Wow, that bucket weighs about 30 pounds when it's full. And she carried dozens of them up and down these stairs before the day is over. The bedroom door creaks open and Mary comes in. Her arms are shaking from the weight of the coal. Her hands are already black with soot, and you see how she favors her left shoulder, probably hurt from all the lifting. She kneels by your fireplace, and you watch her skilled hands set up the wood and coal with quick, practiced moves. The first spark catches, then spreads, and soon a small orange glow starts to fight against the morning cold. "Good morning, Miss," Mary says, wiping her hands on her apron. "Your mother says you need to dress very well today. The Weatherbees are visiting this afternoon, and they're bringing their son." Your stomach does a little flip. The Weatherbees. You've heard about their son, Thomas. He's 26 years old and just came back from India, where he worked as a clerk for the East India Company. Your mother has been dropping hints about this visit for weeks, and you know exactly what it means. This isn't just a friendly visit. This is an inspection. You sit up in bed, feeling the cool air on your shoulders through your cotton nightgown. The fire is already making the room warmer, but it'll be another hour before the chill is really gone. You watch Mary move around the room, laying out your clothes for the day. Not just any clothes. It's your best day dress, made of dark blue wool with tiny mother roof pearl buttons that your mother saved up for 3 months to buy. "Mary," you say, your voice still rough from sleep, "what do you know about the Weatherby, son?" She looks toward the door, then leans in closer. "Well, miss, I heard from their housemaid that he has all his teeth, which is more than you can say for most men his age. And she says he doesn't drink too much, but he does like his cigars." She pauses, placing your corset on the bed. Of course, he's been in India for the last 4 years, so he might have gotten some strange ideas about things. The corset. You look at it and sigh. Every morning, Mary will lace you into this device, made of whalebones and cotton, that squeezes your ribs until you can barely breathe, right? It's meant to give you that perfect hourglass shape that's in style right now. But it also means you'll spend the whole day feeling like someone has their hands wrapped around your waist, squeezing. Gently but without stopping, you swing your legs out of bed, and your bare feet touch the cold wooden floor. The floorboards are wide oak planks, polished smooth over many years, and they're always cold, no matter how warm the fire gets. You stand up, and Mary immediately starts unlacing your nightgown. This is normal. Privacy, as you know it, doesn't really exist for women. Mary has seen you naked thousands of times, and she'll keep dressing and undressing you until you get married. At that point, your husband's helper or your own lady's maid will take over. The chemise goes on first, a thin cotton undergarment that feels like wearing a dish towel, then the corset. Mary places it around your waist and starts pulling the laces tight. With each pull, your breathing gets a little shallower. By the time she's done, you're taking small, careful breaths from the top of your lungs. "Not too tight, Mary," you manage to say, even though you both know it's already as loose as fashion allows. "Of course not, miss. Your mother specifically said you should be able to speak clearly when the gentleman visits." Next come the layers. First, a bustle pad. It's basically a small pillow that pushes your skirt out behind you in the popular bell shape. Then, 3 petticoats, each one adding more bulk and weight. By the time Mary drops your dress over your head, you're wearing about 15 pounds of fabric. And we haven't even gotten to the shoes yet. The shoes are made of kid leather. They are soft and buttery to the touch, but completely flat. Heels won't become popular for many more years. They button up the side with tiny pearl buttons, which Mary fastens with a special hook. Your feet, inside cotton stockings, feel secure, but not very comfortable. These shoes were not made for walking long distances. They were made for sitting in a living room and taking short, elegant steps, while Mary pins your hair into the fancy style that's popular right now. Parted sharply in the middle, then swept back into a low bun with carefully placed curls around your face. You think about what this afternoon might bring. The Weatherby visit is basically a job interview. The job is to be a wife, and the interview involves sitting in your family's front room, making polite conversation, while both sets of parents watch your every word, every move, and every expression. If Thomas Weatherby decides you are suitable, he might ask your father for permission to visit you. During this time, you will never be alone with him. Every conversation will happen while a chaperone watches. Usually your mother, or your unmarried Aunt Caroline, who lives with your family and has strong opinions about everything. Mary finishes with your hair and steps back to look at her work. You look at yourself in the small hand mirror on your dressing table. The face looking back at you is pale, which is fashionable, since tanned skin means you work outside like a servant. Your lips are their natural color, since makeup is considered wrong for unmarried ladies. Your eyebrows are your own, dark and well-shaped. You look lovely, Miss Mary says, and you can tell she really means it. Now, should I bring up your breakfast? Breakfast arrives on a tray. It's porridge with a small amount of cream, toast with butter, and tea that's strong enough to strip paint. The porridge is filling, but has little taste. You eat carefully, thinking about your tight corset, and knowing that any spill will show on your dark dress. After breakfast, your mother shows up in your doorway. At 45, she is still a pretty woman. Though years of having children and constantly worrying about money have carved fine lines around her eyes. She's wearing her second best dress, dark brown wool with black trim, and her hair is done in a style like yours, but stricter. "Good morning, dear," she says, stepping into your room and closing the door behind her. "We need to have a little talk before this afternoon." You put down your teacup and give her your full attention. These little talks usually have important information. "Now you know why the Weatherbees are coming," she begins, sitting on the edge of your bed. "Thomas needs a wife, and you need a husband. It's a practical deal, but that doesn't mean it can't be a nice one if you both act properly." She pauses, smoothing her skirt. "I've been writing to Mrs. Weatherby, and she's told me some things about her son that you should know. He's well educated. He has good chances for a better job in his company, and he saved a lot of money during his time in India. He's also, according to his mother, ready to settle down and start a family." You nod, though your stomach is doing nervous little flips. Starting a family. That's a polite way of talking about the physical side of marriage that no one ever discusses openly, but it hangs over every courtship like a shadow. "Now, there are some rules you absolutely must follow this afternoon," your mother continues. "First, you must not accept any gifts from him, no matter how small. A gentleman should not give gifts to a lady he's not engaged to, and accepting them suggests that you are encouraging him in the wrong way." This is right out of the rule books that your mother reads all the time. The Young Lady's Friend, published in 1837, specifically warns that one gift will lead to another, and it encourages them to offer their hearts to you. Second, you must not touch him in any way. No shaking hands unless he is formally introduced by your father. And even then, make it quick. If he offers you his arm, you may take it lightly, but otherwise, keep your hands folded in your lap. You think about how strange this must seem to young people today, where casual touching is so normal. But in 1855, physical contact between unmarried people is a serious thing. Even engaged couples are only allowed to hold hands and maybe exchange a quick kiss, always with someone watching. Third, let him lead the conversation, but don't be afraid to show you are intelligent. He's been educated, so he'll appreciate a woman who can talk about more than just the weather. But don't disagree with him directly. Even if you don't agree, find gentle ways to share different opinions. This is a tricky balance. Too much intelligence, and you might be seen as not feminine or even threatening. Too little, and you might seem boring or stupid. You've been practicing this balancing act your whole life. Finally, your mother says, reaching over to fix a curl near your ear, remember that he is judging you as much as you are judging him. Watch how he treats the servants, how he speaks to your father, how he reacts when things don't go exactly as planned. These small things will tell you much more about his character than his polite living room conversation. Invisible dust from her skirt. The Weatherbees will arrive at 3 o'clock sharp. We'll serve tea and the small cakes that cook made yesterday. You'll sit on the sofa near the window. The light is good for you there, and I'll sit in the chair nearby. Your father will join us after he's spoken with Mr. Weatherby about business. After your mother leaves, you have several hours to pass before the afternoon show. You walk downstairs, to the family's small library, which is really just a room with 2 bookcases and a window seat, and pick out a book of poetry. It's okay for young ladies to read poetry, though novels are still seen as a bit doubtful. You sit in the window seat and try to focus on the poems, but your mind keeps drifting to the afternoon ahead. The house around you is coming to life. You can hear cook banging pots in the kitchen as she makes the midday meal. The housemaid is sweeping the front steps, a job that has to be done twice a day because of all the coal smoke and horse manure in the street. Your father is in his study, looking over the shop's account books. The house smells of a coal fire, beeswax polish, and the lavender water your mother uses to make the linens smell fresh. Through the window, you watch the street outside. You can hear clearly through the glass. 2 ladies walk past, their skirts swinging with each step, their arms linked as they chat. They are both wearing the same style of dress as you. Dark colors, full skirts, tight tops. But you can tell from the quality of their fabric that they come from richer families. Behind them, their maid walks, carrying their packages and staying a respectful distance behind. A gentleman on a horse trots past, sitting straight in his saddle, his top hat perfectly in place. He's wearing a dark coat with tails and light-colored pants, the usual daytime outfit for men of his class. As he passes your window, he touches the brim of his hat in a polite greeting, even though he doesn't know you. This is normal. Gentlemen are expected to acknowledge ladies, even strangers, with this small sign of respect. The morning passes slowly. You read a few poems, help your mother arrange flowers for the front room, and practice a song on the piano. Playing music is one of the skills expected of young ladies, along with speaking a little French, doing needlework, and being able to sketch fairly well. You're not expected to be amazing at any of these things, just good enough to show that you've had a proper education. Lunch is a simple meal, cold meat, bread, cheese, and pickled vegetables. You eat a small amount, partly because your corset makes big meals uncomfortable, and partly because you're too nervous to have much of an appetite. Your mother talks about neighbors and local gossip, but you can tell she's nervous too. A good marriage for you would solve several of the family's money problems and make your future secure. For the final preparations, you go upstairs to check your appearance one more time. Mary has laid out fresh gloves, white cotton ones that button at the wrist, and your small locket, the only jewelry considered right for an unmarried lady getting visitors. The locket has a tiny portrait of your grandmother inside, and it rests just below the high neckline of your dress. You practice sitting down gracefully, which is harder than it sounds when you're wearing all these layers. The trick is to lower yourself slowly, letting your skirt settle around you in a nice way. Then, fold your hands in your lap. Getting up means pushing down on the arms of the chair and rising smoothly, without showing any effort. At 10 minutes before 3 o'clock, told, your mother sits nearby in her chair, with needlework in her lap to give her hands something to do. Your father stands by the fireplace, checking his pocket watch every few minutes. The room smells of beeswax and the fresh flowers your mother arranged this morning. Late afternoon sunlight streams through the windows, and you hope it makes you look as good as your mother promised. The clock on the mantelpiece ticks toward 3 o'clock. Each second feels longer than the one before. Your palms are a little damp inside your gloves, and you fight the urge to fidget with your skirt. This is it, the beginning of what could be the rest of your life. At exactly 3 o'clock, front door, and you hear the low sound of men's voices in the hallway. Formal greetings, the rustle of coats being taken off, the sharp tap of walking sticks being put in the umbrella stand, and your heart beats hard against the stiff boning of your corset. Mr. Weatherby enters first. He is Thomas's father, a respectable-looking man with silver whiskers and a slight stoop in his shoulders that suggests he spends hours bent over account books. Behind him comes Mrs. Weatherby, a round woman in burgundy silk, whose jewelry catches the afternoon light. And finally, Thomas himself steps through the doorway. He's taller than you expected, with brown hair parted perfectly down the middle and mutton chop whiskers that frame a thin face. His skin has a golden tone that shows he spent years in the Indian sun. And when he moves, there's a careful precision to his actions that hints at military training. He's wearing a black coat that reaches his knees, gray pants, and a white shirt, with a high collar that looks like it might choke him if he turns his head too quickly. Mr. and Mrs. Weatherby, your father says formally, may I present my wife, Mrs. Hartwell, and my daughter, Miss Eleonora Hartwell. You rise from the sofa, slowly and gracefully, letting your skirt settle around you as you've practiced 1,000 times. You give a small curtsy, just a dip of your knees and a slight nod of your head. Too deep would suggest you are of a lower class. Too shallow would seem disrespectful. Miss Hartwell, Mrs. Weatherby says warmly, what a pleasure to finally meet. You, Thomas, has been very eager for this introduction. Thomas steps forward and gives a short bow. Miss Hartwell. His voice is deeper than you expected, with a slight accent you can't quite identify, maybe one he picked up during his time away. Mr. Weatherby, you reply, meeting his eyes for a moment before looking down. The first greeting, but staring for a long time would be considered too bold. Everyone settles into their assigned seats, like actors taking their places on a stage. Thomas sits in a chair across from you, close enough for conversation, but far enough to be proper. The parents arrange themselves as quiet chaperones, present but trying to look busy with their own conversation about shared friends and local news. I trust your journey from India was pleasant, you ask, since it's okay for ladies to ask about travel. Indeed, though it was rather long, Thomas replies. 3 months on a ship gives you a lot of time to think. I found I was quite ready to return to English soil and English society. He pauses, and you notice something in his tone. Maybe relief, maybe something else. The climate there can be difficult for those of us not used to such intensity. You nod with sympathy, even though you've never been farther from London than Brighton. I imagine the heat must be quite overwhelming. Reach 70 degrees. Quite so. In Bombay, we often had temperatures over 100 degrees, with humidity that made the very air feel as thick as soup. He shifts in his chair, and you notice how he unconsciously loosens his collar just a little. Your mother taught you. Rain is certainly something we have a lot of. The conversation continues in this careful way. Thomas tells you about the markets in Bombay, the exotic fruits he learned to like, and the difficulty of managing clerks who spoke a dozen different languages. You share your own much smaller experiences, the books you've been reading, the music you've been practicing, your thoughts about life in London. Each topic is safe and proper, designed to show character without getting too personal. But you're also watching him, just as your mother advised. When Mary enters to serve tea, you notice that Thomas nods politely to her, laughs not, the forced laugh of social duty, but a real amusement that shows in his eyes. When Mrs. Weatherby accidentally knocks over her teacup, sending hot liquid splashing across the small table, Thomas immediately gets up to help, pulling out a clean handkerchief without being asked. Oh, how clumsy of me, Mrs. Weatherby says, dabbing at the spill. Not at all. Your mother soothes her, while Mary quickly appears with a cloth to clean up the mess. These things happen, but you've noticed something else. When the teacup clattered to the floor, Thomas flinched. It wasn't just a normal surprise. It was something deeper. His hands tensed for just a moment, and his eyes quickly looked toward the door, as if he were looking for an escape. It lasted only a few seconds before he looked calm again. But you noted it in your mind. Something about sudden, loud noises affects him more than it should. The formal part of the visit lasts exactly 1 hour, as the rules require. Any shorter would suggest they're not interested. Any longer would be too bold. As the Weatherbys get ready to leave, Thomas asks for a quick word with your father. The conversation happens in the hallway, just out of hearing range, but visible to everyone in the living room. Through the doorway, you watch your father nod several times. Careful precision you noticed earlier. After about 5 minutes, they shake hands, and your father's expression suggests the conversation went well. "Miss Hartwell," Thomas says, returning to the room. "With your father's permission, I would be honored to call on you again, perhaps Sunday afternoon, if that is agreeable to you." Your heart does a little skip. This is it, the formal start of a courtship that would be very pleasant, Mr. Weatherby. After they leave, your mother immediately begins her post-visit review. "Well, he seems quite respectable," she says, settling back into her chair. "Good posture, clean fingernails, polite to the servants. And did you notice how he helped when I spilled the tea? It shows he is considerate." Your father joins the conversation. He saved a very good amount of money during his time in India, he reports. Enough to set up a household without needing help from either family, and his future with the company seems very good. But you're thinking about that moment when the teacup fell, about the careful way Thomas moved, about the slight tightness around his eyes when he spoke of the difficult climate. There are layers to him that the formal courtship process isn't designed to show. Sunday arrives with unusual warmth for late May. You're dressed in your second-best gown, a pale green cotton dress with tiny white flowers, a color that your mother says brings out your eyes. This time, there's no corset drama, no nervous breakfast. You're starting to understand the pattern of these visits. Thomas arrives at exactly 2 o'clock, carrying a small bouquet of flowers. This is acceptable because flowers are temporary and simple. Unlike jewelry or books, which might suggest his intentions are too serious. He's dressed more casually today, in a brown coat and lighter pants, and he seems more relaxed. "Miss Hartwell," he says, offering the flowers with a slight bow. "I noticed these growing in my mother's garden and thought you might enjoy them. They are sweet peas, delicate purple and white flowers that smell like springtime and innocence. As you take them, your gloved fingers brush against his for just a second, and you feel a small electric shock that has nothing to do with static. From your wool dress, they're lovely, you say, burying your face in the sweet-smelling petals to hide the blush you feel rising in your cheeks. "Sweet peas are my favorites." "I hoped they might be," he says, and there's something in his voice that suggests this choice wasn't as random as he made it seem. This visit feels different from the first. With the initial formal greetings over, the conversation flows more easily. Thomas tells you about his childhood, growing up as the youngest of 4 sons, always trying to prove he was worthy of attention. You share stories about your education, the small school you went to, where you learned French and drawing, and enough math to manage household money. "I confess," Thomas says during a quiet moment, "I find London quite overwhelming after 4 years in smaller places. The noise, the crowds, the speed of everything. Sometimes I wonder if I've forgotten how to be properly English." There's a vulnerability in what he says that surprises you. Gentlemen aren't supposed to show uncertainty or weakness. "Perhaps," you say carefully, "it's not about being properly English. but about finding your own way of being English. For years is a long time. He looks at you with something close to surprise, as if he didn't expect you to understand so well. You're very perceptive, Miss Hartwell. Over the next few weeks, Sunday visits become a routine. Thomas visits every Sunday at 2 o'clock, staying for exactly the required hour. Sometimes you sit in the living room, and sometimes you walk in the small garden behind your house, always with your mother or Aunt Caroline in sight. The conversations grow deeper and more personal, though still within the proper limits. You learn that Thomas sometimes has nightmares. He mentions this in a roundabout way when explaining why he often looks tired on Monday mornings. You discover that he writes poetry, though he's too embarrassed to share any with you. He tells you about the strange foods he learned to enjoy in India, the festivals he saw, and the difficulty of managing business relationships across different cultures. In return, you share your own carefully hidden thoughts, your frustration with the limits placed on women's education, your secret dream to travel and see places beyond London, your love of novels, though you're careful not to mention the more scandalous ones you borrow from your friend, Catherine. During your 4th Sunday visit, Thomas makes a request that sends your heart racing. Miss Hartwell, he says, glancing toward where your mother sits with her needlework, I wonder if you might agree to go with me to the exhibition at the Crystal Palace next Saturday. With a proper chaperone, of course. This is a big step. Going to a public event together is a new level of courtship, a semi-public announcement that you are officially a couple. Your mother's needle pauses in her embroidery as she waits for your answer. I would be delighted, you say, trying to keep your voice steady despite the excitement fluttering in your chest. The Crystal Palace, rebuilt in South London after the Great Exhibition of 1851, represents everything modern and exciting about the Victorian era. Inside, there are gardens, fountains, displays from all over the world, and enough wonders to fill days of exploring. Saturday arrives, bright and clear. 6 months to buy, with a matching jacket and a small hat decorated with ribbons. Your gloves are perfect white kid leather, and you carry a small beaded purse that holds your handkerchief. A hired carriage, an open landau that will allow for proper supervision while still providing the adventure of traveling together. Aunt Caroline, chosen as the chaperone for her strict personality and watchful eyes, settles herself in the opposite seat. She has her most stern expression on, and is wearing her sharpest hat, the one with feathers that seem to point accusingly at anyone who might consider doing something improper. The drive through London is an adventure itself. For so many, street vendors call out what they're selling: fresh flowers, a penny a bunch, hot pies, meat pies, sweep your chimneys, soot away. Thomas points out landmarks as you pass them: the new Houses of Parliament with their Gothic towers, Westminster Abbey with its ancient stones, blackened by coal smoke, the bridges crossing the Thames, where large boats, heavy with goods, wait for their turn at the docks. The river itself is thick with traffic, steamboats puffing black smoke, sailing ships with their forest of masts, and the constant parade of smaller boats carrying people and goods across the murky water. As you travel south of the river, the neighborhoods change. The grand squares and elegant houses of central London are gone. Here, the houses are smaller, crowded, closer together, and the air smells of industrial smoke mixed with something less pleasant. It's the kind of smell that comes from too many people living in too small a space with poor sanitation. But then you climb Sydenham Hill, and suddenly the Crystal Palace rises before you like something from a dream. The enormous building catches the afternoon light and throws it back in 1,000 brilliant sparkles. Gardens stretch in all directions, filled with exotic plants and fancy flower beds that form complex patterns when you see them from the palace's high terraces. It's magnificent. You breathe, forgetting for a moment to be properly reserved. Indeed, it is, Thomas agrees, offering you his arm as you step down from the carriage. Though I admit, it reminds me a bit of some of the palaces I saw in India. This Victorian confidence in iron and glass and human cleverness. Inside the palace, you are immediately overwhelmed by the size and variety of everything. The central hall stretches on seemingly forever, filled with fountains and exotic plants. That tower overhead, there are displays on every possible subject. The latest industrial machines, collections of butterflies from around the world, displays of crafts from the far corners of the British Empire, and art installations that mix science with beauty. Thomas guides you through the crowds, paying careful attention to your comfort. When the crowds become too thick, he leads you toward quieter side aisles. When you pause to look at a particularly interesting display, he waits patiently without rushing you. When Aunt Caroline declares she needs a rest, he immediately finds a tea room where she can rest her feet. It's during this break, while Aunt Caroline is busy with her tea and scone, that Thomas leans slightly closer and speaks in a voice only you can hear. Miss Hartwell, I hope you won't think I'm being too bold, but I find myself growing very fond of these Saturday trips and of your company. Your heart stops, then starts again at double speed. This is getting close to a declaration of serious feelings. You glance quickly at Aunt Caroline, but she is focused on methodically destroying a caromed scone. I have enjoyed them as well, you say quietly, your voice barely a whisper. I had hoped, he begins, then stops himself. That is, I wonder if you might consider. But perhaps this is not the right place for such a discussion. You understand perfectly. He's testing the waters, approaching the question of engagement without actually asking it yet. According to all the rules, such conversations should happen. First with your father, then with you, and certainly not in a public tea room with your aunt 3 feet away. Perhaps, you say carefully, such discussions would be better held in a more private place. The look that passes between you has enough electricity to power the palace's new gaslights. He understands that you are not rejecting his implied offer, just suggesting the proper way to do it. Relief and something deeper excitement, affection, flicker across his face. You admire tropical birds whose feathers shine with colors you've never seen. You watch demonstrations of new photographic techniques that can capture a person's image in just minutes rather than hours. You sample exotic fruits whose flavors briefly transport you to distant countries you'll probably never see. But underneath all the wonder and excitement, there's a deeper feeling growing between you and Thomas. A sense of coming change, of decisions that will reshape your entire future by the time you return home. As the sun sets over London's smoky skyline, you know that everything is about to shift. Tuesday evening arrives with a thunderstorm that rattles the windows and sends sheets of rain hammering against the glass. You are in the living room with your mother, working on embroidery by lamplight, when the front doorbell rings. It's past 8 o'clock, far too late for social visits. So when Mary appears in the doorway looking flustered, you know something important is happening. Begging your pardon, ma'am, Mary says to your mother, but Mr. Thomas Weatherby is at the door. Says he needs to speak with the master urgently. Your mother's eyebrows rise nearly to her hairline. Your father appears from his study, newspaper still in hand, looking just as confused. Through the living room window, you can see Thomas's hired carriage waiting in the rain, the horse stamping its feet impatiently as water streams from its coat. Show him into the study, your father says after a moment's thought, Eleonora, you and your mother stay here. But of course, you strain to hear every sound from across the hall. The murmur of men's voices, serious and low. Your father's occasional, indeed, and Thomas's longer replies that you can't quite hear. The conversation lasts for nearly 20 minutes, which feels like an eternity when you're sitting with your embroidery hoop forgotten in your lap, your heart beating fast enough to make the cameo pin on your collar tremble. Finally, footsteps approach the living room. Your father enters alone, but his expression gives everything away before he speaks. Eleonora, he says, and there's satisfaction in his voice, mixed with what might be relief. Mr. Weatherby has asked for permission to pay his addresses to you. I have given my consent. The embroidery hoop slides from your numb fingers and hits the floor with a soft thud. This is it. Thomas wants to marry you. After 6 weeks of careful courtship, he's ready to make it official. He wishes to speak with you tomorrow afternoon, your father continues. I told him to call at 2 o'clock. Your mother will be present, of course, but he will be allowed to make his proposal directly to you. Your mother lets out a little squeak of excitement that she immediately tries to hold back. Oh, Eleonora, we must decide what you'll wear, and we should have cook prepare something special, and perhaps we should move the good china from the cabinet. Mother, you interrupt gently, though your own excitement is making your hands shake slightly. Perhaps we should see what he has to say first, but you already know what Thomas will say. The question isn't whether he'll propose, it's whether you are truly ready to accept him. Marriage in 1855 isn't like getting into a relationship you can leave if things don't work out. Once you say yes, your legal identity basically disappears. Your property becomes his property. Your money becomes his money. Even your children, if you have them, legally belong to him, not to you. Yet, what choice do you really have? At 22, you're already getting to an age where people will start whispering about you being left on the shelf. Your family can't afford to support you forever, and Thomas seems kind, intelligent, and genuinely fond of you. In a world where many marriages are just business deals, the chance for affection feels like amazing good luck. Wednesday crawls by with agonizing slowness. You change clothes 3 times before deciding on a dress of soft gray wool with violet trim. It's serious enough to show you understand the importance of the occasion, but pretty enough to remind Thomas why he's proposing in the first place. Your hair refuses to cooperate, and Mary has to pin and repin the complicated braided style twice before it stays in place. At exactly 2 o'clock, Thomas arrives, carrying a small velvet box that makes your stomach do flips. His hands are shaking just a little as he takes off his gloves. Miss Hartwell, he says formally, though his eyes are warm. Mrs. Hartwell, he nods to your mother, who has sat herself in the corner chair with her needlework, close enough to supervise, but far enough to give the illusion of privacy. You sit on the edge of the sofa, your back straight, your hands folded in your lap. Thomas takes the chair across from you. It's the same setup as those first visits, but now everything feels different, electric, final. Miss Hartwell, Thomas begins, then stops and takes a deep breath. Eleonora, if I may. I have spoken with your father, and with your permission, I would like to speak directly to your heart. This is the moment when everything changes. You nod, not trusting your voice. These past weeks of knowing you have been among the happiest of my life, he continues, his voice getting more confident. Your intelligence, your kindness, your strength of character, ... All of these qualities have made me realize that I cannot imagine my future without you in it. He slides from his chair to one knee beside the sofa, the velvet box now held openly in his hands. Eleonora Hartwell, would you do me the tremendous honor of becoming my wife? The ring inside the box is simple but beautiful. A small diamond, surrounded by tiny pearls, set in yellow gold. It's not flashy or showy, but it's clearly been chosen with care and represents a major expense for a man in Thomas's position. Yes, you whisper. Then you find your voice. Yes, Thomas, I would be honored to accept. His relief is so obvious that you almost laugh. He takes your left hand in his the first time you've touched without gloves and slides the ring onto your fourth finger. His hands are warm and a little rough, probably from his years overseas, and the touch sends a little shiver up your arm. There, he says softly. Now it's official. From her corner, your mother makes a small sound that might be a suppressed sob of happiness. When you look over, she's dabbing at her eyes with her handkerchief while trying to look busy with her embroidery. The rest of the visit passes in a blur of practical talks. The engagement will be announced in next Sunday's paper. The wedding will happen in 6 months, giving you time to prepare a trousseau and Thomas time to find a suitable house. He has found a small house in Kensington, 3 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, and a tiny garden that will be available to rent in the autumn. I know it's not grand, Thomas says, his voice slightly apologetic, but it's respectable, and it's near enough to my office that I can walk to work in good weather. It sounds perfect, you assure him, and you mean it. The idea of having your own household, your own space to arrange as you please, feels like the most luxurious thing imaginable. After Thomas leaves, your mother immediately begins what she calls engagement planning. Lists appear overnight. What needs to be bought, what needs to be sewn, which relatives need to be told. The next few months will be a whirlwind of preparation, unlike anything you've experienced. But first, there are the immediate changes that come with being officially engaged. Starting the very next Sunday, Thomas is allowed to take you on walks, without a chaperone. The first time you step out together, without your mother following behind, feels like the most daring thing you've ever done. You walk slowly through the small park near your house, your hand resting lightly on Thomas's arm, amazed at this new freedom. For the first time in your courtship, you can speak without measuring every word for its properness under your parents. Watch, I confess, Thomas says, as you pause beside a fountain where children are sailing toy boats. I've been terrified for weeks that you might refuse me. Were you really? You ask, surprised. But surely you could tell that I enjoyed your visits. Enjoyed them, yes. But enjoyment and willingness to marry are very different things. He adjusts his grip on his walking stick. I know I'm not the most exciting choice. No title, no great fortune, and I come with some complications from my time abroad. You think about those moments when loud noises made him flinch, about the careful way he sometimes held himself, as if he were expecting pain. Everyone has complications. Thomas, the important thing is whether 2 people can face them together. He stops walking and looks at you with an expression you can't quite read. You're very wise for someone so young. I'm not that young, you protest. 22 is quite grown up. Of course it is, he says quickly. I didn't mean to suggest, that is, I sometimes feel much older than my 26 years. India has a way of aging a person. Over the following weeks, these unchaperoned walks become precious to both of you. Away from the formal rules of living room visits, Thomas begins to show more of himself. He tells you about the fever that nearly killed him during his 2nd year in Bombay, about the coworker who cheated him out of a promotion, about the overwhelming relief he felt when the ship carrying him home finally left the harbor. You share your own secrets in return. Your fear that you're not naturally motherly enough to be a good mother. Your frustration with the limits on women's education. Your secret dream of learning to paint with real skill. not just the simple watercolor painting considered proper for ladies. Perhaps, Thomas suggests, one afternoon, as you sit on a bench watching sparrows hop around your feet, you could take proper painting lessons after we're married. We won't be wealthy, but we should be comfortable enough for small luxuries. The casual way, he says, after we're married, makes your stomach flutter. It's becoming real. This future you're planning together. Along with the walks come other new privileges. Thomas is now allowed to visit you in the front room without formal supervision, though he is still required to leave before dark. During these visits, you are allowed to hold hands, a simple closeness that feels revolutionary after months of careful distance. The first time Thomas takes your hand in his, you're sitting on the sofa looking through a book of pictures he's brought to show you, scenes from India. His fingers weave with yours, warm and slightly calloused, and you're amazed by how natural it feels. Is this proper, you ask, though you make no move to pull away. Perfectly proper for an engaged couple, he assures you, though I admit it feels rather scandalous after all those weeks of keeping my hands to myself. You laugh, and the sound seems to surprise both of you. It's been a long time since you've laughed freely in Thomas's presence. Most of your time together has been so careful, so controlled. But being engaged has brought a new ease to your relationship. The letters start, arriving the very week of your engagement. According to Victorian tradition, engaged couples are expected to write to each other regularly, especially when they are separated by business or family duties. Thomas's work requires him to travel to the company's offices in Manchester for a week, and suddenly you're learning to express your feelings on paper. My dearest Eleonora, his first letter begins. I have been gone only 2 days, yet I find myself missing our conversations more than I expected. Manchester is a busy city, full of the noise and smoke of industry, but I confess I would trade all its bustling energy for another quiet walk through your neighborhood park. You spend an entire evening writing your reply, filling 3 pages, with your own careful handwriting. You tell him about the books you're reading, the changes your mother is making to the house to prepare for the wedding, the small daily details that seem important when shared with someone who cares about them. These letters become the foundation of your growing relationship. In writing, Thomas is more expressive than in person, less held back by the formal rules of polite conversation. He writes about his hopes for your marriage, his plans for the house in Kensington, his slow readjustment to English life after his years away. You discover that you also express yourself more freely in writing. You tell him about your fears as well as your hopes, your questions about what married life will actually be like, your excitement about having a home of your own to manage. The gift-giving begins in earnest as well. Besides the engagement ring, Thomas gives you a small locket with his photograph inside, a formal picture showing him in his best coat, looking serious and slightly younger than he really is. You give him a photograph of yourself in return, taken at a studio in town, wearing your best dress and your most proper expression. But the most intimate gift is yet to come. On a rainy Thursday afternoon in July, Thomas appears at your door, carrying a small, wrapped package. This is rather unusual, he says, looking slightly embarrassed as he hands it to you. But I thought you might appreciate it. Inside the package is a leather-bound journal, its pages blank and waiting. But what makes it special is the message. On the first page, written in Thomas's careful script for Eleonora, to record all the thoughts too precious for ordinary conversation. You run your fingers over the smooth leather cover, touched by how thoughtful the gift is. It's beautiful, Thomas. Thank you. I have one just like it, he admits. I thought perhaps we might both keep journals during our engagement, not to share necessarily, but to help us think through all the changes ahead. That night, alone in your bedroom, you make the first entry in your new journal. You write about the strange mix of excitement and terror that comes with approaching marriage, about your growing affection for Thomas, and about the overwhelming number of decisions that need to be made. The summer passes in a blur of preparation and excitement. Your mother drags you to endless fittings for your wedding dress and the new clothes that will be your married wardrobe. The dress itself is a creation of white silk and Brussels lace that cost more than your father's shop earns in 2 months. But it's considered necessary for keeping up the family's social position. You spend afternoons learning household management, skills that your education had only briefly covered. Cook teaches you to plan meals and manage food budgets. Mary shows you the proper care of fine linens and the best ways to remove different types of stains. Your mother drills you on the social duties you'll have as a married woman, which neighbors to visit, how to manage servants, the proper way to host a dinner party. But perhaps the most important education comes from the married women in your family and social circle. Your Aunt Margaret, who has been married for 15 years, takes you aside for a series of conversations that no one else seems willing to have. Marriage, she tells you bluntly, is not like the novels make it seem. There will be wonderful moments, certainly, but there will also be difficult ones. Your husband will have moods you don't understand. You'll have days when you wonder what you've gotten yourself into. The important thing is to remember that building a life together takes time and patience. She pauses, studying your face. And Eleonora, there are parts of married life that no one discusses directly, but that you need to understand, physical parts. Your face burns with embarrassment, but you force yourself to listen, as Aunt Margaret explains, in careful, indirect words, what will be expected of you as a wife. It's not the romantic picture painted by the poetry you've read, but it's practical information you desperately need. Date approaches with alarming speed. The house in Kensington has been secured, and Thomas takes you to see it on a crisp September afternoon. It's smaller than your family home, but bright and cheerful, with large windows that let in plenty of light and a garden just big enough for a small vegetable patch. The kitchen is modern, Thomas points out, opening cabinets to show off the built-in storage, and there's a proper stove for cooking, not just an open fire. You run your hands over the wooden countertops, imagining yourself preparing meals here, managing your own household. It's thrilling and terrifying at the same time. It's perfect, you tell him, and you mean it. This will be my domain, my responsibility, my home. 2 weeks before the wedding, Thomas makes an unusual request. He asks if you would consider cutting a lock of your hair for him to keep, a token that will be with him always. It's a common custom among engaged couples, but it still feels incredibly intimate. You sit in front of your dressing table mirror while Mary carefully cuts a small section of hair from behind your ear, where it won't be missed. The dark strands feel silky and alive in your palm as you wrap them in tissue paper for Thomas. A piece of me to carry with him, you tell Mary as you seal the packet in return. Thomas gives you a lock of his own hair, already carefully kept, in a small silver locket. Something of mine to keep close to your heart, he says simply. The week before your wedding arrives, with a flurry of final preparations, relatives come to your house like a friendly invasion. The wedding dress hangs in your wardrobe like a beautiful ghost of your future self. Your trousseau, the collection of clothes, linens, and household items you'll bring to your marriage, fills to large trunks that sit at the foot of your bed. Thomas calls every day now, sometimes twice, to check on plans and simply to see you. The formal distance of your early courtship has turned into real affection and comfortable friendship. You find yourself looking forward to married life, not just as a necessary step, but as an adventure you want to share with this particular man. On the Thursday before your Saturday wedding, Thomas takes your hands in the living room and looks at you seriously. "Eleonora," he says, "I want you to know that whatever challenges we face as husband and wife, I will always try to be worthy of the trust you're placing in me. And I will try to be worthy of yours," you reply, meaning every word. Outside, London buzzes with its usual energy. Carriages clattering past, vendors calling out their goods, the constant hum of a city that never quite stops. But in this moment, in your family's living room, with your hand in Thomas's, the future feels both certain and full of wonderful possibilities. Saturday morning arrives, gray and drizzling, the kind of London weather that makes everything look like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. You wake before dawn in your childhood bedroom for the last time, listening to the familiar sounds of the house waking up around you. Cook is already banging pots in the kitchen 3 floors below, and you can hear your father's heavy footsteps as he paces in the library, probably practicing the speech he'll give at the wedding breakfast. Your wedding dress hangs on the wardrobe door like a glowing ghost. The white silk and lace catch the little light that comes through the rain-streaked windows. In a few hours, you'll put it on and become Mrs. Thomas Weatherby, trading your identity as Eleonora Hartwell for a completely new existence. Mary appears with your breakfast tray, but the usual porridge has been replaced with delicate toast and weak tea. It's your mother's way of admitting that your nervous stomach probably won't handle anything heavier. Your hands shake slightly as you lift the teacup, and you notice Mary watching you with a mix of excitement and sympathy. "Nervous, miss?" she asks softly as she begins laying out your undergarments. "Terrified," you admit, then immediately feel guilty for saying it. Young ladies are supposed to approach marriage with joy and excitement, not gut-wrenching fear, but Mary just nods with understanding. "That's natural, miss. My sister said the same thing on her wedding morning. Said she felt like she was about to jump off a cliff without knowing what was at the bottom." The comparison doesn't exactly make you feel better, but it's comforting to know that other women have felt this same mix of excitement and panic. Your mother bustles in shortly after breakfast, already dressed in her best gown of deep purple silk, a color that shows her status as the mother of the bride while still being properly modest. Behind her come Aunt Caroline, your cousin Margaret, and Mrs. Patterson from next door, all armed with pins, ribbons, and strong opinions about how your hair should be done. The process of getting dressed takes nearly 3 hours. First, the chemise, thin cotton that feels like nothing against your skin. Then the corset, laced tighter than usual to give you the perfect shape for your wedding gown. Today, Mary pulls the laces until you can barely take a full breath, but you don't protest. On your wedding day, discomfort is expected for the sake of beauty. The bustle comes next, larger than your everyday one, designed to support the massive train of your wedding dress. 3 crinolines follow, each one adding volume and weight until you feel like you're wearing a small tent. By the time the actual dress slides over your head, you're already tired from the physical effort of carrying all these layers. But when Mary fastens the final pearl button and steps back, the reflection in your mirror takes your breath away. The woman looking back at you is elegant. The dress transforms you into someone worthy of a proper Victorian wedding. Your hair has been arranged in a complicated style, with white silk flowers woven through the braids and curls. A delicate veil of Brussels lace, borrowed from your grandmother's wedding, flows down from a small tiara that catches the lamplight. Your only jewelry is Thomas's engagement ring and a simple, string of pearls that belonged to your mother. You look like an angel, your mother whispers, and there are tears in her eyes that she's trying very hard not to let fall. The carriage ride to St. George's Church feels both endless and far too short. Your father sits beside you, unusually quiet, occasionally reaching over to pat your gloved hand. Through the rain-spattered windows, you watch London go about its Saturday business. Street vendors still call out their goods, children dodge puddles, and life flows on, exactly as before, even though your entire world is about to change. The church appears ahead, its stone front darkened by years of coal smoke, but still impressive with its Gothic design. Carriages line the street outside, and you can see wedding guests hurrying through the rain, their umbrellas creating a forest of black silk. Your father helps you from the carriage, careful not to step on your train. And suddenly, you're standing in the church entrance, with rain drumming on the roof overhead, and the scent of wet wool and old stone filling the air. Through the heavy oak doors, you can hear the murmur of voices as guests take their seats. "Ready, my dear?" your father asks, offering you his arm. You nod, not trusting your voice, and the doors swing open. The church is full. There are more people than you expected. Faces, both familiar and strange, turn toward you with that special mix of curiosity and emotion that weddings bring. Candles flicker in the gray morning light, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. The organist begins the wedding march, and suddenly you're walking down the aisle on your father's arm, your train rustling behind you like autumn leaves. But all you can see is Thomas, standing at the altar in his best black coat, with his hands clasped behind his back. When your eyes meet his, he smiles. It's not the formal, social smile you've grown used to, but something warmer and more personal. Something that says this isn't a performance or a social duty, but the beginning of something real between the two of you. The ceremony itself passes in a blur of ancient words and formal responses. You hear yourself promising to love, honor, and obey, to stay with Thomas and leave all others, to accept him as your wedded husband until death separates you. The weight of these promises settles around your shoulders like a heavy cloak. But when Thomas slips his mother's gold wedding band onto your finger, his hands are steady and warm. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the rector declares. And suddenly, it's official. You are married. You belong to Thomas now, legally and socially, and in every way that matters to Victorian society. The kiss Thomas gives you is brief and proper, right for a church full of witnesses. But you feel the promise of more intimate moments in the gentle pressure of his lips against yours. When you turn to face the congregation as Mr. and Mrs. Weatherby, the world looks slightly different than it did an hour ago. The wedding breakfast takes place at your family home, which has been transformed for the occasion. The dining room table is groaning under the weight of a huge feast: roasted chicken, ham glazed with honey, fresh bread still warm from the oven, jellies and custards, and a three-tiered cake decorated with sugar flowers that look almost real enough to smell. But you can barely eat between the tight corset and the nervous energy that hasn't left you since morning. You sip champagne, a rare luxury that makes your head feel light and floaty, and you smile until your cheeks ache as guests offer congratulations and advice. Uncle William, his face slightly red from his own champagne, insists on giving a spontaneous speech about the sacredness of marriage and the duties of a wife. Aunt Margaret entertains you with stories about the early days of her own marriage, most of which involve household disasters and misunderstandings that seem hilarious now, but probably weren't at the time. Thomas stays close to your side throughout, The reception, occasionally touching your hand or whispering reassuring words when the social duties become too much. You notice how he handles the more nosy questions about your wedding trip and future plans, protecting your privacy even in the middle of a celebration. As the afternoon wears on and the guests begin to leave, the reality of what comes next starts to sink in. Tonight, you'll sleep in your new home as Thomas's wife. The physical closeness that Aunt Margaret hinted at in her careful conversations will become real. The abstract idea of marriage will turn into the daily domestic life with this man you've known for only a few months. By 5 o'clock, the last of the guests have left, leaving behind a house that looks like a party battlefield. Empty glasses, crumpled napkins, chairs pushed out of place. Your mother is already directing the servants in cleaning up, but her eyes keep drifting to you with a mix of pride and something that might be worry. Time to change into your traveling dress, she says gently, and suddenly your throat feels tight with unshed tears. The traveling dress is practical. Dark green wool with a matching jacket designed for the carriage ride to your new home and the beginning of your new life. As Mary unlaces your wedding gown for the last time, you feel like you're shedding one identity and stepping into another. Your father loads your trunks into Thomas's hired carriage, while your mother fusses over final details. Do you have your gloves, your purse, the small bag of personal items you'll need for tonight? Each question feels loaded with a meaning you're not quite ready to think about. The goodbyes are harder than you expected. Your parents stand on the front steps, your mother crying openly now, your father trying to look dignified, but not quite succeeding. This house has been your entire world for 22 years, and now you're leaving it forever. Write to us soon, your mother calls as the carriage pulls away. And remember what I told you about being a good wife. Thomas takes your hand as the familiar streets of your childhood disappear behind you. Are you all right? He asks. Softly, I think so, you say, though you're not entirely sure. It's just ... Everything is different now. Yes, he agrees, but different can be good, can't it? The house in Kensington looks smaller than you remembered, but welcoming in the early evening light. Smoke rises from the chimney, suggesting that Mrs. Davies, the housekeeper Thomas hired, has been preparing for your arrival. The front garden is tidy, with late-blooming roses that smell sweet despite the earlier rain. Thomas helps you from the carriage, and you notice how carefully he guides you up the front steps, as if you might break. The front door opens before you reach it, revealing Mrs. Davies, a comfortable-looking woman in her 50s, with graying hair and kind eyes. "Welcome home, Mrs. Weatherby," she says, and the title sounds strange in your ears. You are Mrs. Weatherby now. Eleonora Hartwell no longer exists. The house has been prepared for your arrival with obvious care. There are fresh flowers in the front room, a fire burning cheerfully in the grate, and the scent of something delicious coming from the kitchen. Mrs. Davies leads you through rooms that are now yours to arrange and manage, explaining the household routine she's set up and asking about your preferences for meals and daily schedules. Your bedroom, yours and Thomas's now, looks out over the small back garden. The bed is larger than the one in your childhood room, with a white coverlet that looks crisp and inviting. Your trunks have already been delivered and sit waiting to be unpacked, full of the trousseau items you've spent months collecting. Thomas hovers in the doorway, suddenly seeming as nervous as you feel. "I'll leave you too. That is ... Mrs. Davies has prepared dinner for 7 o'clock, if that suits you." After he leaves, you sink into the small chair by the window and finally let yourself feel the full weight of the day. You are married. You are in your own home tonight. You will share that bed with a man who is basically a stranger. 6 months ago, Mrs. Davies appears with a tea tray and offers to help you unpack, but you find yourself wanting a few minutes of quiet to process everything that's happened. She seems to understand, bustling away with promises to call you when dinner is ready. Dinner is served in the small dining room by candlelight. It's just you and Thomas at opposite ends of a table that feels both intimate and formal. Mrs. Davies has prepared roasted chicken with vegetables from the garden, and everything tastes wonderful, even though your appetite hasn't quite come back. Thomas tells you about the plans he's made for your first week of marriage. No visitors, no social events, just time for the two of you to get used to living together. He's taken leave from his office, an unusual step that shows how seriously he's taking this change. I thought we might spend tomorrow arranging the books in the library, he suggests, over the custard dessert. And perhaps you'd like to see the kitchen properly, to discuss meal planning with Mrs. Davies. These simple domestic details feel both overwhelming and comforting. This is what marriage actually is. Not the romance of novels or the drama, wedding ceremonies, but the daily business of sharing a life with another person. After dinner, you sit together in the living room. Thomas reads aloud from the evening paper while you try to focus on your embroidery. But the peaceful domestic scene feels fragile. With your awareness of what is expected to happen when you go to bed for the night, underneath it all, at 9 o'clock, Mrs. Davies appears to bank the fires and lock up the house for the evening. She bids you both good night with a meaningful look that makes your cheeks burn, and suddenly you're alone with your husband in your new home. Eleonora, Thomas says softly, setting aside his paper. I want you to know that is. I understand this is all very new for you. We needn't, that is, ... There's no pressure for anything to happen quickly. His consideration touches you deeply, even as it points out how strange your situation is. You know each other well enough to feel real affection, but not well enough to handle an intimate physical relationship without awkwardness. Thank you, you whisper. That means a great deal to me. When you finally go upstairs together, Thomas shows you the small dressing room where he'll change into his nightclothes, giving you privacy to get ready for bed. Alone in the bedroom, you change from your traveling dress into the fine cotton nightgown that was part of your trousseau. Then you sit at the dressing table to brush your hair. In the mirror, you watch yourself performing this nightly routine in a new place. The woman looking back at you is the same as always, but everything around her has changed. This is your room now, your mirror, your bed, your life. When Thomas returns, wearing a cotton nightshirt and a dressing gown, you're sitting on the edge of the bed, feeling shy and unsure. He moves carefully, respectfully, settling on the other side of the bed with space between you. Eleonora, he says quietly. I meant what I said downstairs. We have our whole lives to figure this out together. You turn to look at him in the dim light from the bedside candle. His hair is slightly messy. His face is serious but kind. This is your husband. This gentle, patient man is yours now, and you are his. I know, you say, and I'm grateful for your patience. He reaches across the space between you and takes your hand. It's the same gesture that felt so revolutionary during your engagement, now carrying even deeper meaning. We're going to be all right, aren't we? He asks, and you can hear the uncertainty under his confidence. Yes, you say, and you find that you actually believe it. We're going to be all right. The first days of marriage pass in a blur of getting used to the house and making small discoveries. You learn that Thomas likes his coffee strong and black, that he hums without realizing it while he shaves, that he sometimes talks in his sleep, usually numbers and dates from his work. He discovers that you are not a natural early riser, that you have strong opinions about how books should be organized, and that you make the most beautiful flower arrangements he's ever seen. Mrs. Davies is a huge help in teaching you your role. As the lady of the house, she teaches you to plan menus that balance nutrition with budget, to manage household money, and to oversee the cleaning and maintenance schedules. It's more complex than you expected, running even a small household. But it's deeply satisfying in ways you hadn't imagined. You write your first letter as a married woman to your parents, describing your new home and how you're settling in. The signature, your daughter, Eleonora Weatherby, looks strange on the page, but it looks less strange each time you write. Thomas returns to work after a week, leaving you alone in the house with Mrs. Davies and your own thoughts. The quiet feels both freeing and a little overwhelming. For the first time in your life, you are responsible for planning your own days without parents or teachers or social duties to guide you. You spend the morning rearranging the living room furniture to better catch the light from the windows. After lunch, you walk to the nearby shops to introduce yourself to the local shopkeepers as Mrs. Weatherby of Elm Street. The baker, the grocer, the fish seller all treat you with the respect given to a respectable married woman, and you begin to understand the social importance that comes with your new status. When Thomas returns that evening, you've prepared dinner yourself. It's a simple meal, but one you've cooked with your own hands in your own kitchen. The pride on his face when you tell him makes the effort worthwhile. You're turning into quite the housewife, he says, and there's admiration in his voice that makes your heart flutter. I'm learning, you reply. Mrs. Davies is a patient teacher. As weeks pass, you settle into the rhythm of married life. Thomas leaves for his office each morning after breakfast and returns in the evening with stories about his coworkers and the challenges of getting used to English business practices after his years away. You fill your days with managing the house, writing letters to family and friends, and the slowly growing social duties that come with your new status as a married woman. The physical intimacy that seemed so scary on your wedding night develops gradually and naturally as you grow. More comfortable with each other, Thomas is patient and gentle, and you discover that the mysterious parts of marriage that no one talks about are not as frightening as you had imagined. Your first dinner party as a married couple takes place 6 weeks after your wedding. You invite 3 other couples from the neighborhood, carefully chosen for their respectability and social standing. You spend days planning the menu with Mrs. Davies, polishing the good china, and arranging flowers throughout the house. The evening goes well, the conversation flows, the food is praised, and you receive several compliments on your hosting skills. After the guests leave, you and Thomas sit in the living room, feeling the satisfaction of a successful social event. You were magnificent tonight, Thomas tells you, loosening his collar after hours of formal politeness. I was so proud watching you manage everything so gracefully. Were you really? You ask, still glowing from the evening's success. Absolutely. You're going to be a wonderful addition to Kensington society. As autumn deepens into winter, you realize that you've successfully made the change from a daughter to a wife, from a girl to a woman. The fears that seemed so huge on your wedding morning have mostly faded, replaced by the comfortable routine of a shared domestic life. You still miss your family home sometimes, and you still feel occasionally overwhelmed by the responsibilities of running your own household. But you've also discovered joys you hadn't expected. The satisfaction of creating a home that reflects your own tastes, the pleasure of having time to follow your interests, like painting and music, without your parents watching, the deepening affection between you and Thomas as you handle daily life together. one snowy December evening, as you sit by the fire with your embroidery while Thomas reads his newspaper, you realize how completely your life has changed in just a few months. The nervous girl who waited in her parents' living room for Thomas Weatherby's first visit seems like a different person entirely. "Thomas," you say softly, setting aside your needlework. He looks up from his paper, the lamplight catching the gold flecks in his brown eyes. "I just wanted to say, I'm happy, truly happy." His smile spreads slowly across his face, changing his serious expression into something warm and boyish. "So am I, my dear, so am I." Outside, London sleeps under its blanket of snow. But inside your small house in Kensington, you've built something precious together, a life that is entirely your own. Spring arrives early in 1856, bringing with it a soft warmth that makes London's buildings look almost beautiful. You're in your garden, kneeling among the new daffodils, with dirt under your fingernails. This is a freedom you never had as an unmarried woman. The simple pleasure of getting your hands dirty in your own soil. Thomas finds you there when he returns from work. He looks delighted, not shocked by your messy appearance. "You look like you've been wrestling with the earth and winning," he says, sitting beside you on the small wooden bench he built last month. The roses needed pruning, and Mrs. Davies mentioned that the vegetable patch could use some attention. You explain, wiping your hands on the old apron you've started wearing for garden work. "I discovered I rather enjoy it. This is one of the unexpected joys of married life, the freedom to develop interests that might have been considered unsuitable for an unmarried lady. Your painting has improved dramatically now that you can hire a proper teacher instead of relying on the basic lessons thought to be enough for young ladies. You've started reading novels that would have been forbidden in your parents' house, discussing them with Thomas over dinner like intellectual equals." "I have news," Thomas says, settling back against the bench with the satisfied look of a man bringing home good news. "Peterson is retiring at the end of the year, and I'm being considered for his position. It would mean a substantial increase in salary." Your heart skips with excitement. Peterson's position would make Thomas a senior clerk with real responsibility and chances for further advancement. More importantly, it would provide the financial security to start thinking about expanding your little household. "Thomas, that's wonderful. Do you think you'll get it?" The manager seemed encouraging, he says, trying to hold back his optimism, but not quite succeeding. "He mentioned that my experience in India gives me an advantage over the other candidates." Over dinner that evening, you discuss what Peterson's position might mean for your future. A larger house, perhaps with room for the children you both want, the ability to hire extra help from Mrs. Davies, maybe even a small carriage of your own, instead of relying on hired ones for longer journeys. But you've also learned to appreciate what you already have, the coziness of your small house, where every room holds memories you've created together. The satisfaction of managing your own domestic world. The way Thomas's face lights up when he comes home to find you, waiting with stories about your day. Your first wedding anniversary approaches in the autumn, and you find yourself amazed at how completely your life has changed. The nervous bride, who could barely breathe in her wedding corset, has become a confident woman who runs her household with skill, keeps her own social connections, and has learned to handle the physical and emotional complexities of marriage with growing ease. The anniversary celebration is quietly perfect. You have dinner at home with your best china and flowers from your own garden, followed by an evening at the theater to see a comedy that leaves you both laughing until your sides ache. Afterward, walking home through the gaslit streets with your hand tucked securely in Thomas's arm, you realize that somewhere along the way, love has grown from the careful affection of your engagement into something deeper and more lasting. Do you ever think about how we met? You ask, as you pause under a street lamp to admire the golden light it casts on the autumn leaves. Often, Thomas admits, I remember thinking you looked terrified that first afternoon. I was worried you might faint. I was terrified, you laugh. I'd never spoken to a man I wasn't related to without my mother hovering 3 feet away. And there you were, asking about my reading and actually listening to the answers. You were the first woman I'd met who spoke to me like I was a person, rather than a potential husband, he says, his voice growing more serious. Most of the other young ladies I was introduced to seemed more interested in my job prospects than in me. This honesty is another gift of marriage, the ability to speak openly about feelings and experiences that social rules would never have allowed during courtship. You've learned that Thomas sometimes still wakes from nightmares about his time in India, that he occasionally struggles with sadness during London's grey winter months. He has discovered that you have a quick temper when you're truly angry, that you can be stubbornly independent about household decisions, and that you sometimes cry over novels, even when you know the characters aren't real. These imperfections, instead of making you like each other less, have somehow deepened your affection. But the steady comfort of being truly known by another person. Winter brings unexpected challenges when Thomas gets sick with a fever that keeps him in bed for nearly 2 weeks. For the first time, you experience the fear that comes with a true partnership. The terrifying realization that your happiness depends on another person's health. You nurse him yourself, despite Mrs. Davies's offers to take over the more unpleasant parts of sick care. You sit beside his bed, reading aloud when he's awake, checking his temperature throughout the night, and preparing the special broths and teas that the doctor recommends. When the fever finally breaks and Thomas's eyes focus clearly on your face for the first time in days, you understand something fundamental about the vows you spoke in that flower-filled church. Hello, wife, he whispers, his voice weak, but definitely his own again. Hello, husband, you reply, and the relief in your voice surprises you both. His recovery is slow but steady, and during the long afternoons, when he's well enough to sit up but not strong enough for normal activities, you spend hours talking about things you've never discussed before. Your childhood fears and dreams. His experiences during the voyage to India, the homesickness that nearly overwhelmed him during his first months away, the different futures you both imagined before you met each other. I used to think I might remain unmarried, you confess one gray February afternoon as you sit beside his chair mending one of his shirts. Become one of those independent women who travel and write books and scandalize the neighbors. You still could, Thomas says quietly. Write books, I mean. You have intelligent thoughts about everything you read. The suggestion startles you. Writing books is something respectable women simply don't do, except for moral lessons or children's stories. But the idea plants itself in your mind, like a seed, waiting for the right conditions to grow. When spring returns, it brings Thomas's promotion and the salary increase that comes with it. You celebrate by taking a week's holiday in Brighton, your first trip together since your wedding. The seaside town is popular with couples your age, and you enjoy the novelty of being tourists together, exploring the pier and the shops, and walking along the beach where the ocean stretches endlessly toward France. It's during this holiday that you realize you're probably expecting your first child. The signs are still subtle. A slight sickness in the mornings, unusual tiredness, a sensitivity to certain smells that you've never had before. You decide to wait until you're certain before telling Thomas, but the possibility adds a golden edge to everything you see and do. Back in London, Dr. Matthews confirms your suspicions with the kind of gentle congratulations that doctors give to respectable married women. You're about 2 months along, he estimates, which means the baby will arrive sometime in early winter. That evening, you break the news to Thomas over dinner, watching his face change from confusion to understanding, to a joy so pure it makes your throat tight with emotion. A baby, he says, as if testing the words. Our baby, you confirm. And suddenly, you're both crying and laughing at the same time. The pregnancy changes everything and nothing at the same time. Your daily routines continue, much as before, but now every decision is made with the child growing inside you in mind. Mrs. Davies begins preparing the small room next to your bedroom as a nursery. Thomas becomes almost comically protective, insisting on carrying anything heavier than a teacup and worrying whenever you're out of his sight for more than an hour. Your mother visits more frequently now, full of advice about managing pregnancy and preparing for motherhood. Some of it is helpful. Some of it is just old wives' tales that Mrs. Davies quietly corrects. But you appreciate the connection to the generations of women who have gone through this mysterious change before you. The physical changes are gradual at first, then more and more obvious as summer goes on. Your dresses need careful changes to fit your expanding waist. You develop strange cravings for foods you've never particularly liked, and sudden dislikes for smells that never bothered you before. The tiredness of early pregnancy gives way to a period of amazing energy, followed by the increasing clumsiness of your final months. Thomas adapts to each stage with patient consideration. When you can no longer bend over to tend your garden, he takes over the weeding and watering. When walking becomes uncomfortable, he suggests quiet evenings at home rather than social visits. When you become too large to comfortably share your usual chair in the living room, he immediately buys a wider one designed specifically for your changing needs. You're being ridiculously considerate, you tell him one October evening, as he helps you settle into your new chair with cushions arranged just so. I'm being appropriately considerate, he corrects. You're creating a human being that seems to deserve some extra attention. The baby arrives on a snowy December morning, 3 days after your second wedding anniversary. The labor is long and difficult, but when Dr. Matthews finally places your daughter in your arms, the pain becomes unimportant. She's perfectly formed and remarkably alert, with Thomas's brown eyes and what looks like it will be your stubborn chin. She's beautiful, Thomas whispers, settling carefully beside you on the bed to get his first close look at his daughter. She looks just like you. She looks like herself, you say, marveling at the tiny fingers that grip yours with surprising strength. Hello, little one. We've been waiting for you. You name her Charlotte, after the author whose novels you've grown to love, despite their scandalous reputation. Charlotte Weatherby. A name that sounds both proper and a little adventurous, which seems right for a daughter who arrived during a blizzard with clear opinions about her own timing. The first months of motherhood are exhausting in ways you never expected. Charlotte proves to be a demanding baby who sleeps restlessly and nurses often. Mrs. Davies hires her niece, Sarah, to help with the extra laundry and cleaning. But much of the responsibility falls to you. Thomas helps as much as Victorian rules allow, taking over the night feedings when possible and entertaining Charlotte while you rest during the afternoons. I had no idea babies were such tyrants, you confessed to Thomas one morning after a particularly difficult night. She has very strong opinions for someone who can't even hold her head up properly. She's definitely your daughter, he replies with a grin that suggests this is a compliment, not a criticism. As Charlotte grows from a demanding newborn to an alert infant to a curious toddler, your household settles into new patterns. Thomas's career continues to advance. Peterson's old position has led to more responsibilities and the promise of further promotion. You've started writing seriously, beginning with articles for women's magazines about household management and raising children, then gradually moving toward bigger projects. Your second child, James, arrives when Charlotte is 2 years old, followed, 18 months later, by little Mary. The house in Kensington, once perfectly fine for 2 people, becomes delightfully chaotic, with 3 small children and the extra staff needed to manage them. By your 5th wedding anniversary, you have become important members of your small community. Thomas serves on the church committee and the local school board. You organize charity events for poor mothers and children, using your own experience to argue for practical help rather than moral lectures. Your dinner parties are known for their lively conversation and excellent food, and young couples often seek your advice about the early challenges of marriage. One evening in late spring, as you're putting Charlotte to bed while Thomas reads to the younger children in the nursery next door, she asks a question that takes you by surprise. "Mama, how did you know Papa was the right person to marry?" You pause in brushing her dark curls, thinking about how to explain the complex process of Victorian courtship to a 5-year-old. "Well, darling, we spent time getting to know each other very carefully. We talked about important things and discovered that we enjoyed each other's company. But how did you know he would be a good papa?" This is a more difficult question to answer. The Thomas who courted you so formally was kind and considerate, but you had no way of knowing he would become the father who builds elaborate dollhouses for his daughters and teaches his son to identify every type of tree in the park, I suppose. "I didn't know for certain," you admit, "but I knew he was gentle and honest, and that he cared about other people's feelings. Those seemed like qualities that would make someone a good father as well as a good husband." After Charlotte falls asleep, you find Thomas in the living room with a book, but he sets it aside when you settle beside him on the sofa you bought to fit your growing family. "Charlotte asked me how I knew you would be a good father," you tell him. "And what did you say?" "That I recognized the qualities that matter: kindness, honesty, consideration for others." You pause, studying his face in the lamplight. "I was right, wasn't I?" "I hope so," he says quietly. "I certainly try to be." As your children grow and your marriage deepens, you often think about the detailed social system that brought you and Thomas together. The rule books, with their strict rules, the chaperones who watched every interaction, the formal dance of courtship that seems almost old-fashioned in hindsight. Yet, somehow, despite all those rules and restrictions, something real and lasting grew. 2 people who might never have met in different situations found each other and built a life together. Not the dramatic passion of romantic novels, but something more lasting. A partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and the kind of affection that grows stronger, not weaker, over time. On quiet evenings, when the children are asleep and the house is peaceful around you, you and Thomas still sit together, reading or talking about the day's events. The conversation flows as easily as it did during those early walks in the park. But now it's richer with years of shared experience and common goals. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met?" You ask him one such evening, looking up from the letter you're writing to your cousin in Scotland. "Sometimes," he admits, "though I can't imagine it clearly anymore. This life, with you and the children, feels like the only real possibility. The world around you is changing rapidly. Railways have changed travel, making it possible to visit distant relatives in hours rather than days. Gaslighting is becoming common in better neighborhoods, pushing back the darkness that once defined winter evenings. Photography is getting more advanced, allowing families to save images of their children at every stage of growth. But the basic rhythms of domestic life remain the same. Children still need to be fed, clothed, and educated. Households still require management and care. Marriages still depend on daily kindness and consideration between partners who have chosen to link their lives together. Looking back on your journey, from a nervous young woman to a confident wife and mother, you are struck by how the detailed social structures of Victorian courtship, for all their strictness and artificial rules, served an important purpose. They provided a system in which two relative strangers could judge each other's character and compatibility before making a commitment that would shape the rest of their lives. The rules that once seemed so restrictive, the constant supervision, the formal rules of interaction, the careful steps from acquaintance to engagement, created a space for gradual discovery. You and Thomas learned to know each other's minds before you shared physical closeness, to appreciate each other's characters before you committed to a shared future. Modern young people, you suspect, might find such rules impossible to follow. But there was something to be said for the patience those rules demanded, the careful building of a relationship on a foundation of mutual respect and understanding. As you blow out the lamp and prepare to join Thomas upstairs, you feel a deep gratitude for the strange social system that brought you together. Without those rule books and chaperones, without the formal structure of visiting hours and supervised walks, you might never have discovered that the serious young man from India and the nervous young woman from London could create something beautiful together. Your story began with a knock at the door on a spring afternoon in 1855, when two carefully dressed people sat in a flower-filled living room and tried to decide if they could build a life together. It continues now in a house full of children's laughter and the comfortable silence of a couple who have learned to be truly at home with each other. The Victorian era, with all its strict rules and elaborate social customs, created the framework in which love could grow slowly and surely, like roses carefully cared for in a walled garden. And sometimes, just sometimes, that patient care produced something rare and lasting, a partnership that could survive the storms of illness and change, the challenges of parenthood and responsibility, the simple daily work of caring for another person's happiness as carefully as your own. In the end, that's what dating was like in the Victorian era. Not the spontaneous passion of modern romance, but something more deliberate and perhaps more lasting. A careful dance that allowed two people to discover whether they could trust each other with their futures, their dreams, and their deepest hopes for happiness. As you drift towards sleep in the bed you've shared for 7 years now, Thomas is breathing steadily beside you, and the house is quiet around your sleeping children. You understand that you've been part of something larger than your individual story. You've taken part in one of humanity's oldest traditions, the ancient dance of courtship and commitment, played out according to the particular rules of your time and place. The world will continue to change, and future generations will find their own ways of discovering love and building families. But the basic human need for connection, for partnership, for someone to share the joys and sorrows of life, that will remain constant, no matter how dramatically the social rules change. And maybe, just maybe, there was wisdom in taking time, in moving slowly, in building love on a foundation of friendship and respect, rather than passion alone. Maybe the Victorians, for all their restrictions and formalities, understood something important about the patient work of creating lasting happiness with another human being. The last thing you remember before sleep takes you is Thomas's hand, finding yours across the space between your pillows, a gesture that has become as natural as breathing after all these years of marriage. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges and pleasures, but tonight you rest in the security of knowing that you've chosen well, that the careful dance of Victorian courtship led you to exactly where you belong.